Welcome to the Golden State Take podcast. My name is Yanni. I'll be writing solo today for this video. Danny will be with us later this week as we talk the start of the seasons for the Giants and the A's. Today we're going to be talking about the Warriors and the San Jose Sharks and how this past week has gone for each team. We'll start with the San Jose Sharks. Really tough stretch of games. They did win last night against Columbus, but prior to that, we're on a 5 game losing streak. Worst time of the year to have this losing streak occur. Um, Over this past week, they lost 6-3 against the Nashville Predators, which going into that game was the game of the year for this team, considering where both teams are in the standings. Both teams vying for that last wild card spot, and they came out and completely laid an egg. They did lose 6-3, but this game was over in the first period. They give up 5 goals in the first. Um, Poor defensive play, terrible defensive turnovers in your defensive zone, leading to prime opportunities and prime goals for Nashville. They played better in the second and third period, but when you go down 5-1 in the first, you're not going to come back from that. And it was really disappointing to see that, considering where this team was, what was at stake in this game, and how important this game was. To come out with that energy or lack thereof and come out that flat was really disappointing to see. Um, they end up following that up with a 2-1 loss to St. Louis. Definitely played much better in that game, but obviously the biggest problem with this team over these last 5, 6 games is their inability to score goals. In those previous 5 games prior to the Columbus game last night, in those 5 games, they scored a total of 8 goals, which is a 1.6 average, which is not going to win you games. And I don't think this is a coincidence that this happened right when Macklin Celebrini um, has had a rough 4 or 5 games. He's played decent, but as far as the production, it just hasn't been there in those 5 games. He only has 1 assist. And I think this really shows how much this team relies on him. The moment he isn't finding the back of the net, isn't producing a lot of scoring opportunities, and when he wasn't converting. This team's offense completely went down the drain. They did play last night against Columbus. They gave up a goal 31 seconds into the game, and you definitely got that here we go feeling. But after that, they settled down and really dominated, I thought, Columbus. They played really well. They ended up scoring a late goal to take the lead with a minute and a half left in the game. That first line of Celebrini, Will Smith, and Igor Chernyshov was unbelievable. I mean, Chernyshov had both goals, Will Smith 2 primary assists, and Celebrini with a goal and an assist. Um, they drove the offense for this team, which is what they relied heavily upon. So it was good to see them come out of that little slump that they were in. Um, for today's podcast, I really want to talk about what went wrong. I talked a little bit about Celebrini and the lack of scoring, but I think there was a couple other things that have happened over this past, 5 game losing streak, and really the last 10 games where they've really struggled, and what kind of went into that and what caused that. First, I want to talk about Coach Ryan Warsofsky and how he's handled this team thus far in these last 5 games specifically. One thing that Coach Warshawski does that I'm not a huge fan of, and we didn't see this as much last year, but this year it seems like from the very beginning, he's very quick to jumble up the lines, and when you do that, the good coaches, when they do that, it ends up working out. And with Coach Warshawski, most of the time he switches up the lines. It never really ends up panning out in a positive way. Um, and I think he does it way too quickly. I mean, were games on this losing skid where Celebrini's playing with two, three, four different wingers on his line um, in one game. And I think when you're talking about guys who you want to play together for long periods of time and gain that chemistry, and when every period you're changing it up and adding new guys and benching guys, it's very hard to find that chemistry and rhythm with those other line mates. And I think that he's really quick to try to change things instead of letting them play out and letting them run their course and hopefully trying to have a natural spark occur. And I think in part of the reason he jumbles up the lines is he's been having a him and Will Smith have definitely had some issues this year, especially this last few weeks. I mean, there's been 3 or 4 games where Will Smith has been benched completely, and where he's only playing, 10, 11, 12 minutes in a game. And I know a lot of it has to do with maybe Will Smith's defensive game and or lack thereof, and not being super strong in his defensive zone. But the reality with Will Smith is you didn't draft him for that. Will Smith was the fourth overall pick just a couple years ago. Averaged 2 points per game in college as a freshman. You didn't draft him fourth overall to be a strong defensive player. You drafted him because of his offensive ability and his offensive mind and how gifted he is, the way he thinks the game offensively, the way he can produce and set up other guys. And outside of Macklin Celebrini, he's your best offensive player. He's your second best offensive player on this team. And to me, you cannot. I understand maybe a shift here or there, maybe make a point, but when he's going, half a period or full period with only getting a couple shifts there, you're demoting him to your third line, second line. I don't understand that, especially with where this team is and the fact that they don't have a lot of offensive talent to go and to rely on. To take one of your best guys and to take him out of your lineup constantly, I don't agree with that. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like I said, you didn't bring him here, you didn't draft him that high to play defense. Obviously, you want him to try, and I do believe he is. But as long as he isn't a liability, and as long as he tries in the defensive end and you know just does okay, his offensive ability is going to outproduce the defensive lulls that he has. And so you just at this point you just have to live with that, I believe. And especially with a young player, you did notice those games, a few games in that losing streak a couple of weeks ago. I think that played a part in his confidence because he definitely seemed hesitant to try certain things that he does, certain passes that he usually tries to make. And sometimes they end up working out, sometimes they don't. But again, he's one of the few guys on this team that are capable of, you know, making that highlight reel pass or highlight reel play. And when he's not doing that, you take what makes him so special and you almost take the stick out of his hand. And I think with Celebrini struggling, I think with the team offensively struggling, I think these all play a factor together. And so he bounced back very well these past few games. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but um, I think you got to keep riding it out with him, keep playing him, keep giving him those opportunities because more often than not, he is going to come through for you and help produce for this team. The other thing I wanted to talk about as in regards to the forwards is the lack of secondary scoring. This whole year, we've known that Macklin Celebrini is what drives this offense, him and his line. And outside of that, it's been up and down. And the one specific player I really want to talk about right now, well, there's two, but the one I want to start with is William Eklund. I love William Eklund. He is a good player. He does a lot of things well for this team, but his lack of scoring this year and really this last couple of months has really killed this team. He has 1 goal in 28 games, and obviously that 1 goal we all remember was probably the nicest goal for the Sharks all year. But when you're playing him second line minutes and you're playing him like he's one of your best forwards, which in most scenarios he is, but he's not finding the back of the net, that's going to hurt you. And you pair that with Toffoli, who previous 3 seasons in the league has had over 30 goals. This year, not terrible, but he has 18. You definitely see that he's started to lose a step this year. Still producing somewhat, but when you have Eklund struggling the way he is, and you take Toffoli and you drop his numbers like you have now, if I think Toffoli will probably finish this year, with 10 or so games left. He might finish with 20, 21 goals, 22 maybe, but obviously that's a big drop off from the 30 we've been accustomed to over these last few years. And so, like I said, in order for a team to be a playoff team, be considered a playoff team, being a contender, you need that secondary scoring, and you can't rely on just one player to do everything for you. And like I said, I do like Eklund's game as a whole, but if he cannot get better, and if he doesn't get better at scoring, and his overall shot doesn't get better, it's going to really limit him as a player. And I right now he's playing, second line winger for you, but with his production on a good team, he's playing more of a third line role on a good team. And I think that's where I really do see it finishing at. Um, as this team only gets better and adds more talent. I think the biggest thing with Eklund, and I think teams have started to realize this specifically, and the biggest issue I see with him is if you look at his goals that he does score and his shots that he does take, he's constantly trying to beat goalies low, whether it's 5 hole, whether it's really just, he very rarely will get the puck over a foot or two off the ground. And I think if casual fans are seeing that, and people who are watching the game are noticing that, that other teams and goalie coaches and goalies are scouting that and seeing that. He doesn't have a lot of velocity on his shot, but like I said, it's really just he's trying to shoot 5 hole, and as far as him picking corners and you know his one timer, his slap shot definitely needs work. He fans on that way too much. So just as a whole, his overall shot and placement of his shot needs a lot of work this summer. It wasn't great. This is his third full season, and it wasn't great the last couple of years, but this year it's become way more noticeable now that this team's actually winning some games and fighting for a playoff spot. You need that secondary scoring, and they're just not getting it from him. And like I said about Toffoli, he's 32, almost 33, or he might be 33 years old now, but you signed him to a 4-year contract. This is the second year of it. You were hoping that those first few years he would give you that that scoring, that 30 goal per game type of guy, and then I think they understood that probably later on in the contract we were going to see that come down. Like I said, he's not a liability out there, but you do need that goal scoring production from him in order for him to be an effective player. And this year we just have seen him take a step back, and hopefully it's just this year, and hopefully next year he can figure something out. But I don't. We'll see. But I think now him being around that 15 to 20 goal mark, I think is more realistic for him than hoping for 25, 30 goals for him. So I think him sliding into that third line with Misa, I think is a good fit for him. Michael Misa, I've loved his game so far this year. What I really like about him, and I've started to notice this as the season has progressed and as he's gotten more comfortable playing. Obviously, the first half of the year, he only played in a handful of games, dealt with some injuries. But these last month, 2 months, really since the Olympic break, he's been an everyday player. And I've started to see that for his age, he just turned 19 years old. He plays a very veteran style game. He's very, very relaxed out there. He doesn't try to do too much. He keeps it very simple, which I think that's more, not that he can't do other things and can't be more exciting and do those highlight reel plays. But I think right now he's just trying to get his footing in the league. And I think as he gains his confidence and gains more experience, we're going to start seeing him be more aggressive, um, be more flashy, and trying new things out. But for right now, where he's at, I think he's developed really well so far. He definitely looks the part. He definitely belongs up with the team and playing in the NHL. And I think next year, and especially his third year, I think we'll really start to see him take off and that production start to increase. And like I said, once you get better, more talent around him and start filling out this roster, I think you'll really start to see him take off. So, been really happy with his game so far. As for the defense is terrible, um, which we knew going into this year. We had a pretty good idea what this defense was going in. Mike Greer, I think, did the best he could this offseason. He signed 3 veteran defensemen, Dmitry Orlov, John Klingberg, and Nick Leddy. 3 guys that have played a lot of games in this league, are veterans, and I think he was hoping that they could be that bridge gap until some of the defensive prospects, or until they sign some guys in free agency or make a trade. Just be that bridge gap for the next couple of years. Starting with Dmitry Orlov, I think he's had a pretty good year so far this year. He's an older player. He's about 34 years old. They signed him to a 2-year contract. I think he's been solid in his defensive zone. He's a physical player, provides a little bit of offensive ability. On a good team, he's definitely more of your middle defensive pairing, whereas now he's your number one. So I think again, it's just more of a lack of talent and a lack of depth on this roster. Overall, they did give him a lot of money. I believe they gave him almost $7 million, which is a lot for him. But considering the amount of cap they have, how short the deal is, that's what was needed to get him to sign here. So I don't really fault Mike Grier for the money issue or for the amount of money they gave him. I don't think it's a big deal. Like I said, it's only a 2-year deal. They bring in John Klingberg. Now Klingberg's an interesting player. Earlier in his career, he was known to be a very good and talented offensive defenseman. However, these last 3 years, he's really struggled with injuries. He's had hip surgeries. In the last 2 years, I want to say he's only played in maybe 30 or 40 games total. And so it was only a 1-year deal. There was a little bit of risk involved as far as, if he would stay healthy or how much he was going to play this year. And he's actually played a lot. He's stayed relatively healthy. He's played in most of the games. Yeah, I think he started off the year pretty well, being that offensive defenseman for this team by default, being on the number one power play. However, these last few months, his game has really dropped off, and he's been a huge liability defensively. And kind of how I said with Will Smith, he's not going to be a shutdown defenseman. That's not his game. That's never been his game. But in those scenarios, you hope that his offensive ability, at least it evens out, or his offensive ability can overshadow what he's doing or what he's not doing defensively. And his offensive production not there. And like I said, his defensive production is bad. He's been letting our goalies out to dry most games. Guys are getting around him. He's not picking up bodies in front of the net. His game's really, really come down a lot since the end of the 2025 year. November, December, I thought he was playing well. Since the new year, he's been really bad. And it's only a 1-year deal. I don't anticipate him being back with the team next year. I don't think they're going to re-sign him. I think who knows what the future holds for him. But he's one player that, again, I understand what Mike Green was trying to do, but he's a player that just hasn't worked out these last few months. So I think that's taken a hit for this team. And then that third defender, Nick Leddy. Nick Leddy, not as big of a signing. They claimed him off waivers. Been in the league a long time and just hasn't sustained any good play this year. They even waived him, sent him down to the AHL with the Barracuda, and needed to bring him up due to injuries. So he won't be back next year. He's just a body right now. Also, I want to talk about Sam Dickinson, who is our rookie defenseman. He was the 11th overall pick in the Macklin Celebrini draft and is our best young defenseman on this team right now. With Sam Dickinson, I was very excited for him coming into this year. I still am excited about his future. When it comes to rookies, the hardest position for rookies to develop into to gain confidence and to become a great player is defense. Sometimes it takes those players years to really get to an elite level or even just a good level. So this year, I definitely expected a lot of defensive lapses, a lot of turnovers, which he has had a lot of. But again, I'm okay with it because I'd rather him learn this year, kind of get those things out of his system now, and coming into next year being more reliable as a player. I think he has gotten better as the year has gone on. He's becoming an everyday player. I think when they drafted him, the and what he showed in juniors and in the OHL, he should be a very good two-way player. He's got a great size. He's 6'3", 200 pounds as a 19-year-old kid or 20-year-old kid now. Um, his offensive, he can produce offensively. He hasn't this year, which is again kind of more I put on Ryan Warsofsky. I think that he should be on the power play. He should be put in favorable positions for him to be able to produce. You see flashes, but this year he has one goal. off the top of my head, I can't remember how many assists, but I want to say he's around 10 assists this year. And again, I don't think that's all his fault. I don't see them putting him in those offensive positions. They've really made it a priority to have him focus just on his defensive game, which I'm not is okay if he comes back next year and you give him more of a leash offensively and he can start producing. But what you don't want is him to become is to him for him to focus so much defensively that you don't let him do what he's good at offensively, which is moving the puck. He's got a good shot. He jumps up in the play well. He's a great skater. So I think if you should be wanting to utilize that, especially with him, and because at the end of the day, when the Sharks do start competing for Stanley Cups and do become contenders, he's going to be a big part of that, and you want him to be a really good two-way defenseman. And I think right now the Sharks haven't really done a good job in letting him you know, let his offensive game play out and grow. So I hope that changes with him and with this team, and I hope they do let him start doing that next year because I think it'll bode well for him and for the team for the future. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about as far as what happened this week. Somehow, this team, even with all of these losses, are still 4 points out, which I thought they were going to be way more than that. I think, again, like I said last week, it just goes to show how bad the Pacific Division is. They're 4 points out of the last wild card spot with about 5 teams in the running for it. So um, the Sharks are going to have to go on big run here if they want to make the playoffs. Like I said last week, I think they just miss out, but uh, hopefully this last win against Columbus is going to turn the tide for them. I'll be at the game tomorrow against St. Louis. They play the Blues again. Hopefully they can go on a bit of a winning streak here, and hopefully they do end up making the playoffs. Hopefully I'm wrong about that. As far as the player of the week for this past week, I'm gonna go with Will Smith. In 3 games, he had 2 goals, 2 assists, primary assists on both goals last night, setting up Chernyshov. Overall, I thought he had a very strong game. In Nashville, he had 2 goals. Again, that game was not every no one played well in that game, but I did think he played okay. Put himself in good position. Last night he was all over the ice, so he's our player of the week this week.